Not long ago, the ground beneath Venezuela tore itself apart. In less than a minute, two massive earthquakes struck back to back. And by the time the shaking stopped, entire buildings in and around Caracas had folded into the street. Thousands of people were gone. It was the worst seismic disaster the country had seen in over a century. From a distance, it's easy to file this away as a tragedy that happened somewhere else, to someone else. That instinct is a mistake. The fault that just did this to Venezuela is not some exotic feature on the far side of the world. It's the same kind of fault that runs straight through the United States, under some of its largest cities, and it has been quiet for a very long time. Venezuela did not just suffer a disaster, it handed America a preview. To understand the warning, start with what actually happened. The disaster came as a pair. A magnitude 7.2 earthquake struck first, and then, less than a minute later, a magnitude 7.5 ripped through almost the same ground. Both were shallow, breaking only about 6 to 12 miles below the surface. Close enough to the top that nearly all of their violent energy slammed straight into the cities above. The two shocks landed so close together in time that their seismic waves overlapped and reinforced one another, stacking into ground motion more brutal than either quake alone. That is part of why the destruction ran so deep. Older buildings never stood a chance. Survivors described shaking that seemed to go on forever, 2 or 3 minutes that felt endless. Walls splitting open and furniture sliding while families ran for doorways and open ground. In the hours that followed, tens of thousands were reported missing beneath the rubble, and rescue crews from around the world flew in to dig through the concrete by hand. The country recorded its deadliest earthquake since 1900. All of it traced back to a single feature buried in the crust of northern Venezuela, a fracture called the San Sebastián Fault. This is the seam where two of the planet's great tectonic plates meet and grind past each other, the Caribbean plate sliding east while the South American plate creeps west. For a very long spell, that seam had held quiet. The fault had gone silent, lulling everyone who lived above it, while underneath the pressure kept building. Then, in a matter of seconds, it paid out everything it owed at once. The last time this region was torn apart on anything like this scale was back in 1812, when a devastating quake leveled much of Caracas. 2 centuries of calm is not reassurance. On a fault like this, it is the sound of a debt quietly growing larger. The detail that turns a foreign headline into an American problem is this. The San Sebastián belongs to a specific breed of fault called a strike-slip fault, and the way it works is unnervingly simple. 2 enormous blocks off the Earth's crust are locked together along a line, straining to slide horizontally past each other. Friction pins them in place, sometimes for centuries, while the deep engine of plate tectonics keeps shoving. Stress piles up in the rock, invisible and patient, until the rock can hold no longer. When it finally gives, the 2 sides lurch past one another in an instant, and that violent snap is the earthquake. There is a simple way to feel this. Take a long wooden ruler and slowly bend it with both hands. For a while, it just stores the energy, bending further and further, giving no hint of what's coming. Then it breaks, all at once, releasing everything in a single crack. A fault does the same thing on a scale of centuries. Along the San Andreas, the Pacific side is creeping past North America at roughly 1.5 inches a year, and where the fault is locked, none of that motion is being released. It's all being stored, waiting for the snap. That mechanism and that exact type of fault is not rare. It's the defining nature of the most famous and most feared fault in the United States, the San Andreas. This is a strike-slip boundary running some 800 miles up the length of California. The seam, or the Pacific plate, grinds northwest against the North American plate. The same design, the same locked blocks, the same slow loading toward one unavoidable release. So when people watched Venezuela's cities shudder and fall, they were not watching a distant curiosity. They were watching a full-scale, real-world demonstration of precisely what the San Andreas is built to do. The rehearsal took place in Caracas. The stage for the main event has been set for generations under California. So what can that same fault actually do to America? The honest answer is sobering. The southern end of the San Andreas, the stretch nearest Los Angeles, last broke around the years 1680 and 1812. It has now stayed silent for more than 3 centuries, quietly loading the entire time. In the language of seismologists, it is overdue. This is not guesswork about something that has never happened. The San Andreas has unleashed great earthquakes before, and within recorded history. In 1857, the Fort Tejon quake ripped through roughly 220 miles of the fault across central and southern California. In 1906, the northern San Andreas destroyed much of San Francisco and set it ablaze. Both were near magnitude 7.9. The fault has done this again and again, and it has given no sign that it intends to stop. To picture the next payout, the U.S. Geological Survey built a detailed scenario known as ShakeOut, the work of more than 300 scientists and engineers. It models a magnitude 7.8 earthquake rupturing about 186 miles of the southern San Andreas, with the land on either side lurching by as much as 23 feet in seconds. The projected result is grim. Roughly 1,800 people killed, more than 50,000 injured, around $200 billion in damage, and something like 1,600 fires breaking out at once as gas lines snap across the region. Search and rescue would grind on for weeks. It's worth sitting with what those numbers mean at street level. Freeway overpasses buckling, water and power cut for months in some communities, aqueducts and fuel lines and fiber all sheared where they cross the fault in a single stroke. A modern megacity does not merely shake in that scenario. It's severed from the systems that keep it alive. None of this is treated as science fiction. The USGS puts the chance of a magnitude 6.7 or larger earthquake striking Southern California within the next 30 years at roughly 93%. A quake the size of the one that just devastated Venezuela is not a matter of if for California, it's a matter of when. Venezuela simply revealed in real time the human face behind those cold numbers. But the West Coast is only half of America's link to what happened down south, and the other half is stranger and far less talked about. The very same tectonic plate that just ruptured under Venezuela reaches all the way to United States soil, where millions of American citizens live directly on its edge. And there, the danger arrives in a form the San Andreas cannot even produce: a wall of water. The Venezuela earthquake broke along the southern rim of the Caribbean plate. Trace that same plate to its northern rim, and you arrive at Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, home to more than 3 million United States citizens. They sit right on the boundary, which means the geologic story that just played out in Caracas is, in a real sense, their story too. There is a crucial difference, though. Off the north coast of Puerto Rico, the plates are not simply sliding past each other. The North American plate is diving down under the Caribbean plate, plunging into a chasm called the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean at around 27,500 feet. Boundaries like that, known as subduction zones, are capable of the largest earthquakes on the planet, and they can do something a strike-slip fault usually cannot. They heave the seafloor upward and launch tsunamis. This is not hypothetical. In 1918, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake off Puerto Rico's coast sent a tsunami with waves near 20 feet crashing onto the island, killing more than 100 islanders. An even bigger shock, estimated close to magnitude 8, struck the region in the 1780s. The U.S. Geological Survey rates the earthquake hazard for parts of western Puerto Rico as high as it is for Seattle. A great quake here would put American lives directly in harm's way, and its tsunami could race outward across the wider Atlantic. This is the piece of the Venezuela story that comes ashore, quite literally, in America. And Puerto Rico is no sleepy zone that has forgotten how to shake. Only a few years ago, a swarm of earthquakes struck the island's southwest, the strongest near magnitude 6.4, cracking homes, toppling a beloved natural stone arch, and knocking out power across the island for a population still rebuilding from a brutal hurricane. The ground there is relentless right now, on the very same plate that just failed so catastrophically to the south. Step back far enough and a bigger picture snaps into focus. The Caribbean plate is not a giant. This is a relatively small slab of crust, squeezed and sheared on every side at once. Along the southern edge, the plate grinds against South America, the boundary that just failed in Venezuela. To the north, the same block wrestles North America past Puerto Rico. To the east, a chain of islands marks where the Atlantic seafloor dives under the Caribbean, and to the west, the whole slab presses into Central America. A block hemmed in like that sits under stress from all directions, which is exactly why the whole region is stitched with active faults and studded with volcanoes. The Venezuela earthquake was one edge of that squeezed plate letting go. Puerto Rico rides another edge of the very same plate, carrying the very same kind of pent-up strain. They're not the same fault, and one did not trigger the other. They are two windows into a single relentless system, and one of those windows looks out over American soil. One more lesson is buried in the wreckage, and it may be the most useful of all. Two earthquakes of nearly the same size can produce wildly different death tolls, and the reason is seldom the geology. It is what people built on top of it. Much of Venezuela's devastation came from older structures that were never engineered to survive violent shaking, buildings that pancaked the moment the ground turned to liquid motion under them. Seismologists have a blunt saying for this: earthquakes do not kill people, buildings do. The shaking itself is survivable out in the open air. What crushes people is the concrete and steel above their heads when it was never designed to stay standing. The United States, and California in particular, has spent decades writing some of the strictest seismic building codes on Earth, precisely so that a strong quake does not become a mass casualty event. That is a large part of why tremors of comparable magnitude have killed far fewer people on American ground. Engineering quite literally saves lives. You can see it written in the record. A magnitude 6.5 beneath a city built to modern codes might crack some plaster and lead the evening news. The same magnitude beneath a city of unreinforced concrete can bury thousands. The same energy rising from the earth. Wildly different outcomes, decided entirely by choices made long before the shaking ever started. That protection is not spread evenly, though. Older buildings, unreinforced brick and masonry, and regions that simply never invested in preparation remain dangerously exposed. And Puerto Rico's vulnerability is real. The takeaway is clean and worth holding on to. Geology decides how hard the ground will shake. Human choices decide how many people die. Venezuela is the mirror that shows what happens when a powerful quake meets a built world that was not ready for it. By now, the natural urge is to ask when and to want a date on the calendar. No honest scientist will give you one. Anyone who claims to know the day a great earthquake will strike is selling fear, not fact. The stress inside a locked vault builds in ways we cannot watch directly, and it releases when it wins, on no human schedule. What science can do is genuinely powerful, even without a date. It can map the faults, flag the overdue segments, and calculate honest probabilities. It can even buy a few precious seconds of warning. Systems on the West Coast can now sense a rupture the instant it begins and push an alert to phones ahead of the shaking, enough time to drop and take cover or to stop a train before the ground arrives. Preparation is not glamorous, but it is what actually works. Knowing to drop, cover, and hold on the moment the shaking starts. Bolting down heavy furniture and water heaters. Keeping a few days of water and supplies within reach. Along vulnerable coastlines, learning the tsunami evacuation routes and treating strong shaking near the shore as the only warning you may ever get, because a locally born wave can arrive in minutes, long before any official alert. One thing, though, the science makes unmistakable. The fault under Venezuela had slept for more than 200 years before it moved, and that long silence fooled everyone into feeling safe. The quiet stretches beneath California and Puerto Rico have run even longer. A fault going quiet is not a fault going away. It is a fault waiting. So the footage coming out of Venezuela deserves more than a moment of sympathy before the scroll moves on. It is a rehearsal staged at full scale of a script the United States has been sitting on for generations. The same kind of fault that shattered Caracas runs beneath California. The same plate that broke there leans against Puerto Rico. And the ground will move again. with the next address quite possibly an American one. This is not doom for its own sake. It is the opposite. Every one of those honest numbers is also an instruction, a reason to reinforce a building, update a code, map an escape route, or simply know where to run when the floor starts to move. None of this is a reason to live in fear. It is a reason to respect the forces under our feet, to build wisely, and to be ready, because the one part of this we truly control is how prepared we are when the waiting finally ends. If you want to see exactly where America's ground is most likely to break and the two faults that keep seismologists up at night, we mapped it all out in our video on the 2 earthquakes that will shatter America. Watch that one next.